All right, everybody, what's going on? What's going on? Hello, hello, hello. Testing, testing. I'm early. No one freak out. I'm early. Yeah, nobody freak out. We're starting. We're starting. Chimp1567 says, I honestly don't see Blackbeard being the final villain, considering how much damage he took just from Lost Willy Shock. What a weird name. Emu clears Blackbeard so hard it's actually insane. I mean, I think it's really obvious right now Blackbeard is nowhere near the strength of a final villain. I would say that if you drop Blackbeard on Elbaf right now, he's not like. I mean, if you drop Blackbeard on Elbaf right now, he would run away from Gabon. Like, that's the level of strength that he's at. You know what I mean? Like, he already was like, I don't even want to throw down with old Rayleigh. Old Rayleigh did give him credit and was like, I probably couldn't beat Blackbeard right now. But the fact that this is even like a thing, that Blackbeard was like, oh shit, old Rayleigh, that's a little bit dangerous to me. He's obviously nowhere remotely close to, you know, the level that he needs to be. But I think that's kind of the point, right? He's the Emu's currently the top dog. Blackbeard, he tends to make growth, like he tends to grow in leaps and bounds, you know? Hazard Gibson says Morge thinks he's slick, push back the start time, but then start before just to say he's early. That's the right thing to do, I think. Because you guys get upset if because I can't win either way, right? If I'm late to the stream, it's like, well, why are you late to the stream, right? If I repeatedly push back the time, then you guys are like, well, you're repeatedly pushing back the time. If I push back the time and give myself a generous estimate as to when I need to start stream, then people are like, apparently then I'm cheating the system as well. So what am I supposed to do? Now you might say, Morch, just be on time, right? Why don't you just be on time, right? That's just the way that you should do it. I don't have a response to that. I try, I try. Mic sounds weird? Oh shit. Hold on, hold on. Oh god damn it, it's this mic again. It always does this shit. Alright, hold on, hold on, hold on. God damn it. God damn it. Let me do this. Let's test this. Let's fix this. Hello, hello, hello. Hello. Okay, it should work. Hello. Okay, okay, okay. Mute that one. Alright, we good? We good? We should be good now. We should be good now. Sorry about that. Thanks for telling me. Andrew Anami says, run us our 23 late points for delaying stream and then acting like you're early. I am early. I'm now early. You know they're changing daylight savings time to make it permanent? At least in the United States. I mean, other countries don't even do daylight savings time. Right? Still one of the most insane practices that we have. If this fails in the Senate or whatever for some reason, then there's something actually. I don't care who it is. You need to vote that senator out. Fixing tech issues on stream should count towards late points BTW. No. I feel like I should get bonus points as charity for doing that because you guys know how much I struggle with that. What? So they're just getting rid of it? Yeah, I mean, there's no real reason to do it. You know, there's no real reason to do it. I don't even know what the reason initially was. Because I think at the end of the day, most people would rather just have, you know, how we swap between like there being extra time in the evening versus what, I guess extra time in the morning or something like that. I think most people would just prefer extra time in the evening. You know, like I prefer the feeling of just, you know, wrapping up the workday and it doesn't feel like my day is gone, right? It's nice to feel like, oh, I look outside, it's still sunny, you know? It feels like you're getting more free time in the evening, in a sense, you know? Anders says, I actually like getting back an hour of sleep lol. Yeah, but then you lose it. It's like swip swap. Like, so there's one day of the year that you
get some extra sleep, and then 1 day of the year where it reverts back. So like it's kind of, I don't know. Tiamat Chui says, I don't know how to pronounce this. Uh, says Tiamat Chui says that's the craziest piece of legislation you can think of right now. No, of course not. But it is the one piece of legislation that should be completely bipartisan, right? So it's one thing. At the end of the day, there's some obviously terrible pieces of legislation, laws, etc., that you would not like. Most people, in my opinion, shouldn't agree with, right? But at the end of the day, if you are, let's say you're a Republican viewer in a red state with red senators or whatever, from your perspective, it might be like, well, I agree with this, therefore I'm not going to go up against my senator. I'm not going to call up my senator, right? My point is this, which is that this is one piece of legislation where I don't care who you are, right? Like, there's no reason a senator should go against this one, right? Because there's no excuse. They're not this is something that everybody wants, Democrat, Republican, whoever, right? So this is not like, like there's a lot of laws where I'm like, if you're a senator who goes for this, I think you're a giant piece of shit. But I could see logically why, to out of self-preservation for your job in the state you're in the party you're in, that you would vote for this, right? I don't respect it, but I could logically see why you would do it. This one, there's no logic. If you don't if you don't vote for the daylight savings change, you are actually just like an insane person who is out to spite your own constituents or some shit. Anyway, you know what I'm saying? Cause and effects is bipartisan in this Congress. I think you underestimate the power of polarization in your country. No, I mean, I 100% understand the polarization, but that's the point, which is that this is finally something that is so simple and clear cut. It's just like nobody has any skin in the game to try and stop the daylight savings shift, right? So this is one of those where it's like, if people can't even agree on this, then it's just like, then it's just like, I don't. There's no words for it. There's no way to describe it anymore. Anyway, continuing on. Continuing on. Let's get things rolling. Let's get things rolling. Also, let's get the stream likes up to let's get stream likes up to 50 real quick. Let's get stream likes up to 50. Hold on. Okay. Okay. Let me log back into Whimsical. Henchme987 says getting more sun during work hours is still useful though. I feel like maybe if I so it's not useful. Okay, so not everybody's going to be in agreement with this, I suppose. I just feel like the vast majority of people prefer, you know, coming out of a work day and there still being sun. But obviously, if you work in the trades, specifically outdoors, then maybe you would rather um, have sunlight in the morning. But even then, like, what about heat and stuff like that? I don't know. I don't know. Cause and effects is I could only like the stream once. Cause and effect, I see your prediction. I'm gonna get it up. Give me 1 second here. All right. 11, 8, 9. Okay. All right, all right, all right. Can you believe we're almost at chapter 1200? Isn't that insane? Like, how did this happen? How did we get this far? I've been a weekly One Piece reader since roughly so the first One Piece chapter that I ever read. Who wants to guess the first One Piece chapter that I ever read? What the fuck? Why'd this go away? It's a memorable chapter. It's a memorable chapter. Hold on. Audio's going to go away for 1 second. Please, nobody freak out. It's just going away for 1 second, and then it'll come back. All right? All right, there we go. You should be able to hear me. You should be able to hear me. All right, good stuff. Is Elbaf ending at 1200? I think Elbaf will end a little bit after chapter 1200. I think it'll end around chapter 1206. I know that sounds very specific, but I have reasons for why I think it'll end at around 1206. Tio Treviso, thanks for the 5-man. Pirate King Tangent. I originally did have S-Croc as a candidate, but I cut it out. I still think Lafitte is a Nami fight. If a new Seraphim exists, I would bet Ace. So this is in reference to the recent Pirate King podcast where Tio Treviso's submission was talking about if... Okay, let's go down this little path real quick. And cause and effect, I know you got a prediction. I'll get that in a second. So I want to discuss this, right? Because there's just talk right now going on about final villain, etc., right? So I would say the biggest thing going for Emu, if we had to pretend that he's going to be the final villain, I still lean Blackbeard. I'd say the biggest thing going for Emu is his squad, you know? Yeah, we're dealing with Sommers and killing them right now and they're bums, but that's not out of the norm, where generally the first characters that we're meeting in an or going up against in an organization they're softballs, you know? They're designed to... they're not supposed to be the hardest characters to defeat for the heroes, you know? Like, just think back to the Big Mom pirates, right? Think back to the Beast pirates, right? You know, the first characters, like in the I still remember we hit Zoe, and the Strahds are fighting the Beast pirates at the time, and it was like fucking random ass fodder like Sheep's Head and shit. And I remember people were talking about like Sanji and Brook beating Sheep's Head and being like, this is a big deal or whatever, right? And you get to Wano, and the first Beast pirates that we're fighting are characters like fucking the random gifters like Hold'em, Basil Hawkins and stuff like that, right? It's not the hardest stuff. Same thing with the Big Mom pirates. It takes a little bit to get to the heavier hitters. You can apply this to any organization, you know, like Baroque Works. Yeah, at the end of the day, Baroque Works was a really difficult group to defeat, but it started with shit like Mr. 8, Miss Monday, you know, even Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine were jokes, you know, like it's a lot of warm-up stuff for the crew before you get to the heavy hitters, right? So when I say that Emu's his best argument for final villain, aside from, you know, all the lore and everything like that, and the long-standing status as king of the world, is simply that his organization underneath him is fucking broken. It's unfair as fuck, right? Yeah, the immediate God's Knights that we're up against, they're not the hardest, right? But this is the first ones we're being introduced to. We still haven't seen Shamrock in action. We still haven't seen, you know, Grow, whatever, Manmei Groho or whatever his name, however you say it or whatever, in action. And we've still got all the Gorosei and everything like that. These characters are substantially stronger than the fucking Blackbeard pirates right now. The Blackbeard pirates, you can't even count on even with Aokiji. Like, if you took Aokiji out of the situation, fucking 80-year-old Garp essentially wipes the floor with the entire Blackbeard pirates in their home turf, right? So Blackbeard pirates kind of a joke in comparison, right? But the flip side, so the simple way you have to look at it is, for the Blackbeard pirates, they need, and this is not even counting for Emu's side, this is not even counting the Seraphim that he's about to get, and we're actually not even counting the Marines, because, like, if you want to be perfectly fair, right now the Marines are also on the Celestial Dragon side, right? This is being as harsh as possible to Emu's squad and subordinates, right? Even if you're as harsh as possible, and you remove, let's say he doesn't get the Seraphim, let's say you remove the Marines, let's pretend they defect, and Emu doesn't just Dami Reversi all of them, because he could just do that, right? Even if we pretend that stuff, he's still got all the God's Knights and the Gorosei, and he can buff all of them with omens and stuff like that, right? That alone is stronger than any single Yonko crew that we've ever faced, right? Easily. So, Emu's got the best, like the simplest, strongest argument for Emu is that it gives the Straw Hat Pirates as a whole a far greater challenge. Now, the catch is with Blackbeard Pirates, they are established to be on the come up, right? Van Augur says, we're still learning our abilities, shit like that. Flip side, how much can they really learn to become proper opponents for end of story Straw Hats? Tiptio pointed out in the Pirate King podcast that, you know, at this point, Zoro and Sanji are going to be advanced Conqueror's Haki masters, right? The fuck is someone like Shiryu going to do against them? Right? Forget fighting Zoro. How's he going to fight against even Sanji? Do we think Shiryu's a Conqueror's Haki user? I don't know about that. It doesn't seem like it. Zoro's fight, let's say Shiryu somehow fights Zoro, then who the fuck's fighting Sanji, right? The Blackbeard Pirates just don't really have a lot of strength behind them, right? So that segues back to what I would love to hear some arguments in favor of the Blackbeard Pirates. I don't know how, because like the tricky thing is like even if they get stronger, Conqueror's Haki is like such a big game changer that at this point, if both Zoro and Sanji are reaching the like put it this way, the captain himself, Blackbeard, was uncertain, at the very least, uncertain in his ability to fight 80-year-old right hand of the previous Pirate King, right? So if Blackbeard himself isn't certain about his odds going into that fight, despite having, you know, a clear advantage, right? How the fuck is Blackbeard gonna have two subordinates, Shiryu and somebody else, become stronger than Prime Rayleigh and Gaban that fast, right? With Blackbeard himself, there's less of a question mark because we know there's weird stuff up with Blackbeard, right? He shouldn't even be able to eat 2 fruits in the first place. There's weird stuff like he doesn't sleep. He scarred Shanks. We know that there's some unexplained elements about him that have yet to be revealed, right? With Shiryu, who's the second strongest, removing Aokiji from the equation, there's not really these sort of arguments. Shiryu has kind of been established for some time. Like, he was established in his introduction as being Magellan's equal. That's basically what he is. He's equal to Magellan. Impressive. Magellan's no pushover, but that's not like a fucking Prime Rayleigh, Prime Gaban. That's not even an Admiral level character, right? Equal to Magellan. That's basically it. Very possibly weaker than Magellan, considering Magellan was able to take him down and imprison him, assuming that's how things shook out, right? But that's basically it. Not a Conqueror's Haki user, whatever. And that's Blackbeard's second guy, right? His third guy, we don't even know who his third guy is. There's not a clear, is it Burgess? Is it Lafitte? Is it someone else, right? So not a clear cut opponent for Zoro Sanji, right? The Seraphim are what I look at, and that's what I've been looking at, right? And I've said that before, that Blackbeard, things should play out. He's stolen Saturn's identity. The main use for that should be stealing the Seraphim. That's the clearest opportunity. Maybe something else opens up in the future, but that's what seems to be the case right now. Blackbeard's shown interest in the Seraphim, yada yada, right? So the Seraphim would upgrade Blackbeard to final villain material. Sorry, Blackbeard's squad to final villain material. But then that finally leads to the question of like, okay, then who does Sanji fight? And that's what Tiptio was talking about in the Pirate King podcast for his submission, which was just like, okay, well, if Zoro's fighting S-Hawk, who does Sanji fight? And that's a really good question, because there's not a clear number 2 among the Seraphim after Mihawk, right? At the very least, it would have to be a Seraphim that could access Conqueror's Haki. So it's a difficult situation. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, if you want to listen to the recent Pirate King podcast, it just came out. I did do that Pirate King podcast entirely high, which means that I am now checked off for all of the late penalties that I promised. If you would like to support the channel, then consider joining the Pirate King podcast. You get access to that podcast and all previous podcasts. There are now 40 of them officially. They're all about an hour and a half long, where I answer every single Pirate King member's question in depth. And I tend to go more into other things as people ask them outside of just One Piece. So if you're curious on thoughts on other things like movies, TV, etc., blah, 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 you can go listen to previous Pirate King podcast or submit your submission for the next one if you have something that you want me to answer. So go check that out. But anyway, let's continue on. Oh, Abrar Ahmed says, also, March, congrats on your mural video getting 1 million views. My personal favorite video of yours. Thank you. I think it's the best put together theory video that I've ever done. And I'm also happy that out of all of the mural videos that are out there, like mural analysis videos, I think mine is the top one at the moment. So I like that because I think it's obviously I'm biased, but I think that it's got um, a lot of observations that other people don't. Yeah, I didn't actually realize that it had gotten because I stopped tracking that after the first year that it came out. Anyway, continuing on. First of all, I said that I would catch. Um, Before I get into the supers, I said I would catch who's cause and effect. Cause and effect. So what did you say? Cause and effect. You said something. Um, My prediction: Luffy uses his fruit to transform and heal. Maybe a phoenix. Yeah, maybe. I mean, he did turn into the genie. That would be wild. Let's see. All right. Um, Ivan Bro, thanks for the 5. Do you think Luffy's chest scar will change? Like Emu's sword will add to it? I lean towards no. I mean, it might. I lean towards no, just because the Void Sword does seem really powerful, so that'd be interesting. But from what we've seen in One Piece, I feel like generally speaking, there's two things, right? Number one, I think Oda's pretty tight with scars in the story. So generally speaking, a scar is only given to a character when it's something. It's not just like, oh, something like that was a really hard attack that they just ate. It's usually like something that's very important to the character's journey, if that makes sense. Like it's establishing like a low point of the character's overall journey, right? So like for example, when Zoro got his scar from Mihawk, that was kind of the moment that broke Zoro, and then from then he had to rebuild and just re rethink his whole path to becoming the world's strongest swordsman. It really humbled him and then set him off on a new trajectory, right? It was for the best. It was for him, right? So the scar kind of is like a reminder of where he fell short and what he needs to climb back up to undo, if that, or like redeem himself, I suppose, right? Luffy with his scar from Marineford. That was Luffy's greatest moment of failure with Ace, right? Like he failed to save Ace, failed to save someone he cared about for the first time, realized how weak he was in the grand scheme of things, and that's what spawned, the 2-year time skip and most of Luffy's growth, right? Shanks, he has a scar, and it's, from Blackbeard or whatever, so it's implied that that was like a formative experience for Shanks, yada yada, right? The one exception is like Zoro got those scars on his legs from Little Garden that Oda's kept, and it's like I don't know if people even fucking remember that. Like if you were to ask people like, "Hey, Zoro's got another set of scars besides the one on his chest," I think the average person would struggle, to figure it out. Anyway, but that's kind of the trend, so that's why I hesitate to be like Luffy's gonna get a scar from this, just because I don't know if this is gonna be that impactful. If it remains to be seen how big of a defeat this is going to be. Is this going to be a defeat where it's like, okay, he loses but gets back up by the end of the arc? Then I don't think a scar makes sense, right? If it's a defeat like, oh my god, Emu destroys him, captures him, takes him back to the Holy Land or something like that, then yeah, maybe a scar is warranted. The other reason I don't necessarily think it's going to cause a scar is because Luffy's had this very same sort of injury many times before, and Oda hasn't gone with a scar, which is, it's people have talked about how it's visually very similar to Luffy getting impaled by Crocodile. So and that didn't leave a scar. So already got impaled by Crocodile, nothing. Impaled by Lucci, nothing. Katakuri, nothing. So it doesn't seem like a new type of injury, I guess. I think with the Kainu, Oda, because it's magma and everything like that, and also just symbolically it was important right then. So I don't know. I wouldn't bet on there being a scar, but it depends on where the narrative goes after that. Again, it's the Void Sword, so maybe it's more powerful in some way, and maybe Luffy can't even heal from it. Maybe there's some magic shit to go with it. So maybe there is a scar. And Ryan Ami, thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 46 months, man. I hope you enjoyed the last Pirate King podcast. Continuing from last stream, Sasuke's loss greater than Ace's death. Part 2 is defined by the fact that Naruto lost the fight against Sasuke. It had greater impact and consequences on the story, the character, and his dream compared to Ace's death. I think that's like a really hard sell for me, because it's just like Sasuke's loss is not a permanent consequence. You can say that there's bigger events that shape a character, right? That have a lasting impact on the character. Because if you want to argue like, did Ace's death spawn as much character growth or change for Luffy as maybe some other series would for their main characters, that's a totally different argument, right? That's a completely different argument, because I think most people would acknowledge that Luffy isn't a character who fundamentally changes a lot. If you want to argue like bigger impact on the plot overall, uh, sure, you could argue that Sasuke leaving, right? It's a bigger impact. Sasuke leaving has less of an impact on the world as the Marineford war, right? But you could argue it has a bigger impact on the plot. But those aren't the things that we're really debating here, right? It's literally just like within that storyline itself, right? I don't think there's any, like, in the context of that storyline, I don't think that there's any story arc where a character has done as much to try and rescue one character who is, by the way, undeniably much, much, much closer to Luffy than Sasuke was to Naruto, right? Where a character has done that much to try to save the one person that they love the most in the world, and not only do they fail, but that person dies in the end, right? I don't think that there's a comparable storyline. On top of that, if you just want to look at that storyline in, that Naruto storyline, Naruto goes through much, much, much less than what Luffy does, like in terms of physical struggle, emotional pain, and ups and downs, and actual like physical pain. That he doesn't. It's not even remotely close to what Luffy goes through starting from the Sabaody loss all the way through the end of Marineford. Like, it's not remotely close. Naruto loses to Sasuke. That's pretty much it. Like, that's all that, like, they go after Sasuke. It's a night where they all attempt, they get they get their fights and stuff. They struggle. Naruto gets to Sasuke himself, loses to Sasuke. That's not the most mind-blowing, like, if you just track out Luffy's journey, starting from his emotional journey, starting from when the news of Ace's execution launches, right? When we're revealed that in Sabaody, and everything Luffy experiences from then through like travel, like he does so much, right? He's lost his whole crew. He's by himself. So he has to survive Amazon Lily, travel across the seas into literal hell, not literal, but essentially One Piece's version of hell, fight through all versions of hell, basically get defeated, put on the brink of death by the devil, come back from the dead practically with like a 1% chance to live, climb out of hell, escape the devil, go into the biggest war in the world, get passed around by all the strongest characters established in One Piece so far, and essentially get fucked up bit by each of them over and over, get resurrected again, fight through, just through on sheer willpower and spirit, manage to free Ace, and then still have the person he loves the most, who he's done all of this for, die in front of him. It's just not even remotely close to the Naruto Sasuke situation. Sorry, Ender, I'm often on the same page as you, but I think that this is like a deep disservice to what Oda did with Marineford. It's like, it's not even in the same stratosphere, in my opinion. If you want to argue like the long-term character changes or long-term plot impact, that's a different discussion. That's more so like, well, saying Oda fumbled the repercussions of the storyline, right? But I'm saying, just looking at that story in and of itself, it is exponentially more dramatic and emotionally arduous for the main character than anything Naruto goes through at any point in the story, Morge said, or Ender says, Morge, I'm literally talking about the aftermath, not what occurred in the arc, through the arc LMAO. I would agree with aftermath. I mean, like, but if that's the case, if we're talking about aftermath, then what do you call? I think in the immediate aftermath, Luffy is significantly more broken losing Ace than Naruto is. Like, from what I recall, Naruto just lies in bed and is sad, whereas Luffy literally has like a breakdown, which is particularly significant for Luffy because you have to consider Luffy's a character who is up to this point in the story been like the embodiment of confidence and spirit and self-belief, right? Whereas Naruto's always been like a little bit of a sad boy at times. But if you're talking about the post-time skip, right? Post-time skip storyline, yeah, Naruto obviously more shaped by the Sasuke experience than Luffy is by the Ace experience. But I think at that point, then it's like, then you can, it's not even a Naruto, like, if you want to put Luffy under that lens, then there's a ton of stories that have more fallout for their main characters from traumatic events than Luffy does. So that's not Oda's strength. So I'll definitely give it to you for Naruto and Sasuke in that regard. But then I would also point out, like, there's tons of other anime, manga, other TV show, movies, etc., blah blah blah. That you know, Luffy's just not. Oda just does not do that much for Luffy's long-term character development. That's just Luffy's almost always going to lose character arguments that come to long-term character development and long-term character arcs. Even in One Piece itself, right? Put it this way: forget other series. In One Piece itself, other characters have significantly more formative experiences take place in the story that have long-term repercussions than Luffy does, you know? Anyway, when I talk about the Marineford storyline and its strengths, I talk about it in isolation, not what happens afterwards, you know? Sorry, everything up till the time skip. I include post Marineford. Anyway. I kind of view post Marineford as part of the Marineford arc, but it is what it is. Mr. MMF2, thanks for being a Yonko team member for 45 months, man. Yo, more Jesse, we need a new JoJo video. The last one you made is making numbers. Also, I predict we won't cut to Luffy and Emu next chapter. I did actually see that, because it was random. Like, we saw in our, we're doing our revenue at the end of the month or whatever, and it's like, oh, Manga Morge had, like, a random bump in revenue. And it was like, oh, shit, it's because fucking, because Steel Ball Run came out, so there's an influx of JoJo's content. So that is something to consider. To Tio Treviso, thanks for the 2. I see Blackbeard giving Seraphim Holy Knight / Gorsei power-up / Dami. If I were to do something for Manga Morge again, it wouldn't be JoJo's content. It would be Fire Punch. I see Blackbeard giving Seraphim Holy Knight / Gorsei power-up / Dami. Yeah, if he gets Emu's abilities, if he steals Emu's abilities. Now I'm not so sure about him stealing Emu's abilities. I've got a few kind of crazy theories about Blackbeard that are circulating in my head. I've got one that's oh, you know what? Before I forget, let me write one down that I've been playing with for a little bit. Because this one's been in my head, but not written down for a little bit. Alright, continuing. Kid Smitty 94, thanks for the 5. Everyone takes L's, gets saved by Emu's time running out, Blackbeard's waiting in the flower room. That would be an insane bet if that came out true. Insane call, sorry, not an insane bet. Everyone takes L's, gets saved by Emu's timer running out, Blackbeard waiting in the flower room. This is one thing I've been confused about, because I've seen some people argue that Emu wasn't going serious against Loki, but that makes no sense because he's on a timer, right? That's what the consensus is. So if a character's on a timer, then there's now no longer any argument that they're taking things easy or that they're not actually trying, you know? The fact that Emu's on a timer means that logically he's going to be doing precisely as much effort as he feels is needed to resolve every situation as efficiently as possible, right? Grizzly Adams, thanks for the 5. None of Zora's potential final matchups have a good counterpart for Sanji fight. That's a great, great point. The Gods Knights are the only faction that Oda could add someone. Yeah, that is very, very true. The one that's also been... So, again, I put out my video explaining, my corrected thoughts on Sanji and everything like that. But there is like a simple part of why it's often so hard to predict certain things for Sanji, like outside of like, Conqueror's Haki, stuff like that, or even how strong is Sanji going to be end of story, is because before Scopper Gaban, there were no Sanji end of game analogs. Like, there's no sort of metric, or there's no sort of bar that we can guess Sanji is going to reach. The bar essentially becomes just like Sanji fans' belief that Sanji is going to be comparable or equal to Zoro, or like at least comparable to Zoro by the end of story, right? Therefore, wherever Zoro lands up, that's where Sanji should roughly land up, right? But for most of the story, that was kind of the case. Like, Zoro always had clear bars that he's going to reach at the end of the story, right? Mihawk, which means that however strong Mihawk appears to be, we know Zoro will be past that at the end of the story. Then we got Rayleigh, right? Which means that here's another bar, right? Like, however strong Rayleigh is going to be, or Rayleigh was, we know Zoro's going to be past that, right? As the story progresses further, Oda adds other pieces like Ryuma, right? That's hard to speculate on it or whatever, but there's more swordsmen that are added to the story, so swordsmen like Venus Juro, etc. So there's consistent characters that are regularly added to the story where it's like, okay, Zoro will be stronger than that guy, stronger than that guy. So there's always stuff, right? And then on top of that, we have Zoro's final, like, there's good options for Zoro final opponents. So some people think it'll be Mihawk, some people think it'll be like fucking Gorosei, like Venus Juro or something like that. Some people even think it'll be Garling, right? So there's lots of options for Zoro's final opponents that are all towards the top of the hierarchy of One Piece, right? Sanji in both categories, in terms of character analogs and potential opponents, has always been a fucking question mark. Because we didn't know about Gaban for a long time. We kind of knew the name, but we didn't know how strong he was, right? So it's just like vague concept of the Pirate King had a third dude named Gaban, but we don't really know anything about him, right? So that was always, there was no one to measure him to, like, Luffy had Roger, Shanks, later Joy Boy, stuff like that. Zoro had Mihawk, Rayleigh, stuff like that. Sanji's just like, it's just like a hope and a prayer. It's like, we believe that he will, like, wherever Luffy and Zoro end up, Sanji won't be that far behind. And that's fair, because Sanji's always been part of the monster trio. But Oda also shits on Sanji so much, especially post-time skip. Really until Wano, Oda shit on Sanji in terms of, like, feats and stuff like that for a long, long time. So, it was rough times, right? And then on top of that, in terms of Sanji's potential endgame opponents, it's vague. Like, you kind of have to, there's no clear-cut answers, right? With Zoro, it's like, he might fight Mihawk, he might fight a stronger version of Mihawk, like S-Hawk, or like Dami versing Mihawk, or at least he's fighting like a fucking Gorosei, like Garling or Venus Juro or something like that, right? There's clear options. But Sanji, it's like the best guess that people had for Sanji for years was fucking Kizaru. It was Kizaru. That was the best guess for Sanji for years. Now even Kizaru, it's like a question mark, because Kizaru's going through his own sort of character crisis, character storyline or whatever. And it's like, I don't fucking know if Kizaru's even on the world government side at the end, if there's somebody else that's supposed to fight him. Like, Kizaru and Sanji did get that little interaction in Egghead, but it didn't feel like enough that it's like, that's going to be Sanji's end of story opponent, right? So Sanji's still in this nebulous area where it's like, you look at all the main villain groups, I'm looking at the Blackbeard Pirates, I'm like, I don't know who the fuck he fights among the Blackbeard Pirates. Maybe Lafitte, right? Maybe. I don't think anybody's happy if Sanji's fighting fucking Burgess or something, right? So Blackbeard Pirates, that's a question mark. But then we look over at, the Marines and stuff, and it's like, I don't know, does he fight Kizaru at this point? Is that still happening? We thought it would happen for a while, but that might have been wishful thinking. And so then we look at Imu's group, and it's like, okay, maybe he fights a Gorosei. I don't know which Gorosei. Mars, I don't know. I don't know if Sanji fans would be happy if Sanji just fought Mars. Mars seems kind of strong. I don't know. So then maybe it's a God's Knight. It's tricky, you know? And then we look at the Seraphim, and it's like, I don't know who the fuck he fights among the Seraphim, right? We know he's gonna fight someone strong, but we just don't know. There's not a clear answer as to who it would be, you know? Anyway, Sanji stealing Ivankov. I feel like Oda did Sanji dirty with that, where it's like, why don't you get trained by Ivankov? It's like, it's just so fucking random. Because, like, it's not random. It's just like, Luffy's getting trained by the right hand of the Pirate King. Zoro's getting trained by the world's strongest swordsman. Sanji's getting trained by, like, I don't know, Dragon's, like, third best guy, fourth. I don't know how strong Morley is. And then on top of that, I think the idea that Kamabaka Kingdom is really good at cooking is really random and just forced in there for Sanji, right? So it's like, okay, you also are learning cooking from really good cooks, I guess. It's like special cuisine. Why? It just is. Okay. And then on top of that, a lot of it serves to like humiliate Sanji, where it's like, most of it seems like a gag to set up his terrible, terrible nosebleed jokes post time skip, which just sully his character further. I think Oda did Sanji no favors by having him train under Ivankov. It's very random. Ivankov was a here damn mentor for Sanji. Yeah, kinda. If Sanji had been trained by anybody else, he wouldn't have the fucking nosebleed gag for the first several hundred chapters of the time skip. Ivankov is the GOAT, stop being disrespectful, Lord. I like Ivankov a lot as a character, but it's kind of like if you just stack Rayleigh, Mihawk, and Ivankov side by side in that context with those three, then it's kind of it's that fucking three-headed dragon meme where it's like well-drawn dragon, and then goofy dragon, right? Like, that's no disrespect to Ivankov, but it's like, it's not really the same, you know? All right, continuing on. Justin, thanks for going to Pirate King tournament for 45 months, man. Your theory from this Tuesday could lead into my theory about the secret Holy Knight guarding the last poneglyph, who is secretly managing the project that will restore Imu's full health and abilities. I really wonder if we're going to see, like, Imu Unleashed would be crazy. I feel like, yeah, it's probably right now Imu needs to have some weaknesses and stuff like that. But I do wonder if the last poneglyph is going to be involved in this arc. I feel like it might be a little late for that. That's interesting. Henchme, thanks for the 800 jewels. I appreciate it. JO5, thanks for the 2. Luffy runs Drums of Liberation gimmick and is fine. A lot of people thinking Luffy's going to heal and might be fine. That's totally possible. JR182, thanks for the 2. You said in the video Sanji could fight S. Doflamingo round 2. At this point, I don't think that. I think with Sanji getting advanced Conquerors Haki and stuff like that, it's just, I think even S. Doflamingo would be not that good of a challenge for him. I think Sanji needs to be pitted against someone who also has advanced Conqueror's coding. But none of the Shichibukai have ever shown that, you know? The only one who might, maybe, is Boa Hancock. And obviously that's not a good Sanji opponent, right? Oda could write it such that Crocodile, next time we see him, has advanced Conqueror's Haki, and therefore Oda could set up the reveal that Seraphim Crocodile has also been able to unlock that. Maybe Crocodile always had the potential for, or maybe he used to be able to do it, but got broken in the New World and lost the ability, who knows. But I don't see a clear analog for Sanji in the Seraphim. To Pure Treviso, thanks for the 2. Predict Emu mentions Davy Jones is Emu mentions Davy Jones is Emu Kaguya. No, Emu and Kaguya are just so different. I think they're not even remotely similar. Points of comparison. TJM78, thanks for the 5. Favorite One Piece channel. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming through. Damian Wright sent Argentina for 98 jewels. Oh, yeah, the World Cup final. So finally watched the World Cup game last weekend. It was what? Argentina, Switzerland. And, that was fun. So we're going to be watching the finals this weekend on Sunday. So, yeah. Let's get stream likes up to 50 real quick. Who should I root for in the finals? Who should I root for? Isis Key 7 DT, thanks for being a Yonko tier member for 34 months. Prediction: now that Luffy is down, a new character has to show up in Elbaf. Oh, yeah, let's put that down. A new character has to show up in Elbaf. This is from... Your second prediction is Luffy will be down for the majority, if not all, of the chapter. Is that too safe a prediction? I think that's too... I'm gonna say that's too safe of a prediction. I don't want to do a binary prediction where it's like either you think Luffy gets back up or he stays down, Especially if it's like he's down for the majority, if not all, of the chapter. A little bit too broad. Crest Jotaro, thanks to the 2. Hey, Morge, I started med school last week. All right, so I know that this is not the same as general med school, right? But we just watched The Pit season 2. I think The Pit's a great show. Love watching The Pit. I don't know if you're probably not going to be an emergency surgeon or whatever, right? But how do I say this? I am so impressed by people who go into the medical field because it, like, other fields obviously require big brain, right? Like engineering, science related shit, etc. But med school, I feel like, requires not just a big brain, but strong stomach, Like, some of the shit that they do in The Pit, again, I'm not saying that's what you're going to be doing, but I'm just like, how can you be this desensitized to the human body? Like, people's innards being cut open, etc. I'm squeamish with stuff like that, so even just watching The Pit, which is a fake TV show, when I see them having to cut people open and do certain things, I'm like, I'm just going to look away. I'm not going to watch this part. It's funny. Yeah. Ace Bacumbix is the pit being designed to run until the wheels fall off, according to the showrunners, worries me. I don't know. I mean, I never watched ER or whatever, but I know there's so many med shows that just last forever and ever, So I don't think The Pit is a show that needs like, there's some shows that I watch, like, like a Better Call Saul, where I'm like, this whole show, like, everything needs to lead to something, I'm watching, it feels like, very defined character arc, storylines, plot, and obviously I know Better Call Saul does lead to stuff. Then there's other shows like The Pit where it really just is, it's very grounded for the most part, in the sense that, you'll see, it feels like we'll see characters come, go, have different experiences. Not every character is destined to succeed as an emergency doctor or whatever. Like, it's just a peek into the world and the things that they grapple with. And so as long as they can keep that interesting, that's fine. I don't feel like The Pit needs some overarching grander story, I would agree with a lot of critiques that people have had, which is the last season was too focused on the main character. Isis says, Isis K7 DT says, Morge, what team is LeBron going to? I mean, I've heard Philly a lot. It's just, I love LeBron. I know there's supers to catch up on. Let me just get this off. I love LeBron, but the man, he's my favorite player, but sometimes it can be hard. Sometimes it can be hard because the dude is an attention whore. He loves the spotlight being on him. He loves people wondering where he's going to take not just, his talents, but his brand, his empire, etc. And these are the last couple years of his career, apparently. So he's going to milk the clout that he's got as much as possible. It's like, dude, just come on. Anyway. But good luck on med school. Sorry, Crestitaro. Good luck on med school. Big props to you, man. Big props to you. Mitch Cam 28, thanks for the 5. We overestimate the Straw Hats and Blackbeard Pirates. We overestimate the Straw Hats. Blackbeard Pirates losing to Garp isn't that bad when the Straw Hats would also lose to him. Burgess lost to Sabo, who's at least Yonko 1 level. But the difference is that, yeah, the Straw Hats have bad showings. Like, for example, Shuri, like a single God's Knight, did take out Jinbei, Brook, Nami, Usopp, right? But it's not about losing to Garp. It's how easily, not a single one of them was able to successfully stall Garp for a single second by themselves. I mean, single second you could be... The one hit that they clearly got on Garp, like Sans Aokiji, right? Was because Garp had to jump in to save Kobe. It's not like Shiryu even landed a hit on him by himself. It's because he had to jump in to save Kobe, right? Compare that to the Straw Hats. I've seen the Straw Hats fend off Big Mom, like the mid group of Straw Hats fend off Big Mom multiple times. Zoro single-handedly scarred Kaido, right? Who's in his prime. Zoro single-handedly scarred Kaido. And he did well against Kaido every single interaction, every single one-on-one interaction that he had with him on the rooftop. There's not a single time that Kaido and Zoro squared off on the rooftop and Kaido got the better of Zoro. It didn't happen a single time, right? Obviously, rooftop Zoro's not stronger than Kaido. Obviously, current Zoro's not stronger than Kaido. But the point being, like, the gap in ability is night and day, right? Luffy's right hand is out here going up against a Yonko who is in his prime and, able to do stuff, right? He's able to do stuff in one-on-one situations. You throw the majority of Blackbeard's crew at fucking 80-year-old Garp, a shell of his former self, and the most that they can do is like a fucking sneak attack that relies on Garp having to protect his subordinate, right? So not even like, sure, you snuck up and stabbed Garp. It's like, no, Garp had to be fucking distracted trying to save Kobe. No, literally not even distracted. He had to throw himself in harm's way for Shiryu to hit him, right? Like, compare that to Zoro scarring Kaido just straight up. And this was Zoro before he got all of his power-ups, right? This was Zoro in fucking Wano before he even got, his king fight and all of these fights, right? So compare Luffy's first mate in Wano to Blackbeard's first mate right now, right? I got Sanji beating Shiryu right now, and Sanji doesn't even have Conqueror's Haki, Paper cut scar, but it's... Okay, let's dial it back. Let's be you guys are missing the point. You guys are missing the point, which is fine. We can dial it back. Let's pull back. Even though every single thing I said about Zoro is objectively true, right? Every single interaction that he had with Kaido one-on-one, Zoro got the better of Kaido. That is objectively true, right? Even if we want to dial it back, fine. Let's just keep it simple. Zoro was able to scar Kaido, even if you want to call it a paper cut scar. Zoro was able to scar Kaido straight up, right? He was able to do that before Zoro got Mastery of Conqueror, or before Zoro got his future power-ups, right? Shiryu could not do that to Garp without Garp throwing himself in the way of the attack, right? While the entire rest of the Blackbeard Pirates were fighting Garp at the same time, right? There's no equivalent showing for Shiryu to what Zoro did against a stronger opponent, right? Like, what's the argument here? You get what I'm saying? Garp is above Kaido, you bum? Do you think he's that much above Kaido that we could... Because I don't think 80-year-old Garp is above Kaido. If you think 80-year-old Garp is above Kaido, you would have to think that he is so far above Kaido that it makes sense that the only way that you would have to think he's so far above Kaido that Shiryu stabbing Garp, managing to stab Garp in a giant team attack on Garp while Garp is throwing himself in the way of the attack is somehow more impressive than Zoro pre-power up scarring Kaido one-on-one, right? Do you get what I'm saying here? Like, even if we're like really generous, let's just say it's just a paper cut scar, whatever that means, just a paper cut scar, yada yada, right? It's still infinitely more impressive than anything Shiryu's done, right? All the Blackbeard pirates attacking Garp at the same time, and it still took Garp jumping in front of Kobe for Shiryu to even stab him at all, and Garp immediately takes out Shiryu after that. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. If you think 80-year-old Garp beats Kaido, you can't read. Exactly. Like, I'm like, how far do you guys want to go? Because, like, even if you think 80-year-old Garp is equal to Kaido, then Zoro's more impressive than Shiryu by a huge margin. Even if you think that 80-year-old Garp is stronger than Kaido, you would need to imagine that 80-year-old Garp is way, 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 way stronger than Kaido to compare Shiryu landing a hit on 80-year-old Garp with the rest of the Blackbeard Pirates helping him, with Garp throwing himself in the line of fire for Kobe, right? To put that above Zoro scarring Kaido just one-on-one straight up, when Zoro had most of the bones in his body broken. Like, is this, there's not even, it's not even in the same stratosphere. It's just a ludicrous sort of point of comparison. Like, put it this way, I don't see Shiryu beating Sanji right now. I don't know. Like, could Shiryu, does Shiryu even have advanced Conqueror's Haki? He couldn't even scar Kaido, could he? I'm continuing with the supers. I'm just like, oh, did I miss some? I think I caught all the supers. Not all the supers, but I think I'm like on track, right? Because the last person I answered was Mitch Cam, and we're continuing down the line, right? JR182, thanks for the 2. Why do you think Oda took long to give Sanji benchmarks? So I mean, historically throughout the story, this was already the case pre-time skip. It's just Oda's continuing the pattern post-time skip, and post-time skip storytelling, Oda takes longer to write storylines, so there's more, the effect is exacerbated. Generally speaking, if you look at pre-time skip, Oda always makes Luffy and Zoro look good, and then he's always cool with having Sanji have like several arcs where he's not getting feats, or he's not getting good showings, or he's being used as a hype tool. But Oda does eventually have a sort of point in the story where he reestablishes that Sanji is in the same category as Luffy and Zoro, that they're all part of the monster trio, right? It's just that it takes some time often for Oda to reestablish that. So you see that throughout pre-time skip. You know, like, especially in East Blue and Whiskey Peak and stuff, Oda's more so playing up Luffy and Zoro's point of comparison. They're fighting equally and stuff. But then we're getting stuff for Sanji, like the hunting competition or whatever. If you look at the whole stretch post-Alabasta all the way through Water 7 Enies Lobby, until Enies Lobby, Oda tends to make Sanji look significantly worse than Zoro and Sanji, than Luffy and Zoro in a lot of situations, to the point that Oda doesn't even give Sanji a bounty, right? But then we get to Enies Lobby, and it's like, oh no, Sanji's fighting an opponent that is about as strong as Zoro's opponent, right? And they both beat their opponents much easier than Luffy beats his opponent, you know. And then from then on, Thriller Bark, Sabaody, Oda basically portrays Luffy, Zoro, Sanji as like all basically the same tier, right? Note, it's a big myth that Luffy was ahead of Zoro and Sanji after Gears. That is absurd. It's disproven literally like arc after arc pre-time skip. That's based on nothing. Zoro and Sanji immediately one-shot their opponents as soon as they use their power-ups. Luffy can't even do that to Bluno with Gear Second. Like, Luffy's not in a different tier than Zoro and Sanji pre-time skip with Gears. That's you would have to. I don't even know where that sort of myth comes from. It's based on nothing. All from the moment they all get their power-ups all the way to when they're fighting the Pacifista as a team, it's pretty clear that they're all roughly the same level, right? Luffy's the strongest, but they're all the same tier. Anyway, then we hit the post-time skip, and I'd say for the majority of post-time skip, Luffy and Zoro do seem, until Wano, Luffy and Zoro do seem ahead of Sanji, because Oda just doesn't like making Zoro look bad. He gives Zoro lots of cool moments. Luffy keeps getting power-ups. And Oda basically continually uses Sanji to hype up new characters, be that Virgo, be that Doflamingo, be that random-ass Big Mom pirates like fucking Daifuku or whatever, right? It just happens a lot. But then once we get to Wano, Oda kind of restores the balance and establishes that at the very least Sanji and Zoro are same tier, or at least comparable or whatever, right? It's just the way that, and now I think with Elbaf, I think Zoro and Sanji are going to get a bump to put them closer to Luffy, personally. Yeah, it's just the way Oda's okay with having Sanji lag behind, at least in showings for some time, but then whenever we get to big storylines, he reasserts Sanji in the dynamic. Eric says Lucci is literally too... Eric, what happened to your... I didn't unmod you. What happened to your mod status? Unless you're the fake Eric Torlato. Here, I'll add you as mod. Lucci's literally 2 times his right hands. Yeah, but Zoro and Sanji immediately defeat Kaku and Jabura the moment that they use their power-ups, right? Luffy, notably, like people get too fixated on Lucci is so much stronger than Kaku and Jabura. The problem is Bluno. Kaku and Jabura are several times stronger than Bluno. And Gear Second Luffy couldn't put down Bluno as easily as Zoro and Sanji in Ashura and Diablo Jambe put down Kaku and Jabura. See what I'm saying? Like, we have no way of knowing how Zoro and Sanji using Ashura and Diablo Jambe would do against Lucci, but that's because they stomp Kaku and Jabura so fast. Like, there's not even any way to even, like, compare, right? Could Luffy in Gear Second beat Kaku and Jabura that fast? Evidence actually suggests no, because he couldn't do it to Bluno. Like, you can compare Luffy's fight to Bluno. He almost had to pull out Gear 3 to put down Bluno, right? Yeah, he slaps Bluno around, but he doesn't beat him as efficiently as Ashura, Zoro and Diablo Jambe Sanji, right? So it's kind of a stupid argument to be like, well, Luffy did this against Lucci. It's like, yeah, Lucci is twice as strong as Kaku and Jabura. Luffy went extreme diff to beat Lucci, right? Zoro and Sanji fucking stomped their opponents. You can't really, like, what the fuck, how much easier are they supposed to beat Kaku and Jabura to prove that they're still in the same level as Luffy, right? And again, you can use Bluno as the point of comparison. Luffy's not beating, like, there's no evidence that Luffy could beat Kaku and Jabura with Gear Second as easily as Ashura, Zoro could or Diablo Jambe Sanji could. There's contradicting evidence to that, right? Eric says Sanji and Zoro could have beat Lucci. No, I think that it would be very close, though. Like, these are extreme difficulty fights all the way across. Eric, you know how... Don't play dumb, Eric. You know how tiers work, right? Being in the same tier doesn't mean that you can also beat... Luffy is like... Whatever Daoriki Lucci is, Luffy is like maybe 1 Daoriki higher. Like, he almost would have lost without the Usopp, you know, pep talk or whatever. Zoro and Sanji are 100% in Luffy's tier after that fight. And again, you can compare their showings against the Pacifista. They all do about the same. Luffy's the one who gives the finishing blow, but it's all roughly the same, you know? Abe Kadir 2 says, yeah, Gear 3 Luffy would have beat Kaku and Jabura easily. Cool. So did Zoro and Sanji. So they're all in the same tier, you know? Eric says, except Gear 3 is his ultimate move, not Gear 2. Yeah, cool. I agree. Doesn't put him in another tier than them, you know? On top of that, we also see, like, characters don't really stand still for Gear 3, you know? Lucci did, because he thought he could tank it, but after that, he dodged all of the Gear 3 attacks, you know? Injured Zoro versus Pacifista, exactly. Bismuth2966 says Zoro and Sanji used named attacks, though. If Gear 2 Luffy used a Gatling attack, he'd instantly drop Kaku and the others as well. Cool. So if Luffy used his strongest gear set... One, he did use a lot of named attacks against Blueno, including Jet Bazooka. And two, your argument is basically if Luffy used his strongest gear second attack, then he would put down Blueno. That's... Or put down Kaku and Jabura. Cool. That doesn't put him in a different tier than Zoro and Sanji. What's the argument for Luffy being a different tier than Zoro and Sanji? Yeah, pre-time skip, they were almost equal. Again, we already saw this with the past. Like, what's the Pacifista? They're all put in the same club. You know, why are you guys arguing this? Sebi says Mord's so bad at power scaling. I mean, there's no counter arguments that are coming out. That's all. No counter arguments. GR182 says another factor specifically for Kaku. Zoro also went extreme diff with Kaku and only won because of Ashura. But then you would compare power up to power up. The fact that Zoro went, what do you call? The fact that Zoro did so well in base against Kaku and is almost equal to Kaku in base, that's not, what do you call? That's not a point of comparison to Zoro versus Gear 2 Luffy. Obviously, you wouldn't have base Zoro versus Gear 2 Luffy. You would compare Ashura to Gear 2 or Ashura to Gear 3, right? I think you know what I think? I think opinions got skewed because Zoro and Sanji, it's almost like Zoro and Sanji beat their respective opponents so fast that people almost forget that their power-ups stomped. Like, people almost kind of fixate on the fact that their fights were high difficulty overall and ignore the fact that they were fighting in base for most of the time. Does that make sense? Because with Luffy, like, he fought against Blueno in base, but then he went Gear 2nd against Blueno, and that is like a memorable sort of sequence, right? So we kind of all remember that, oh, damn, Gear 2nd Luffy just mops the floor with Blueno, right? With Zoro and Sanji, it's like, okay, we fought in base for long enough, Ashura, fight's over, right? Sanji, it's like, fought in base long enough, Diablo Jambe, over. So it kind of skews people's views to be like, it makes people not... If we'd seen Zoro and Sanji fighting with their power-ups for an extended period of time, like Luffy did against Blueno, or against Lucci afterwards, I think people would have a different opinion. But it's almost like they crushed their opponents so decisively, it's like, all people remember is like, Kaku is 2200, Jabura is 2180 or whatever, and Lucci was 4000. That's all that people remember. It doesn't take into account that when they use their power-ups are clearly as good as Luffy's gears, you know? Bismuth says, I actually agree that Luffy isn't a whole tier above. I'm just saying that the argument Luffy can't beat Kaku and the other in the same manner that Zoro and Sanji did is not accurate. It's just, if we're being really, really pedantic, right? If we're being really, really nitpicky, yeah, do I personally believe that Oda would write it such that Luffy beats Kaku and Jabura if he used gears as easily as Zoro and Sanji did? Sure. If we're being really, really, you know, just anal, it's like, well, Zoro and Sanji did factually defeat Kaku and Jabura with their power-ups way easier than Luffy did against Blueno, and Blueno is like not even remotely close to their strength, right? Like, the gap between Blueno and them is much bigger than the gap between them and Lucci. So, for being really anal, you could make an argument the other way, you know? Obviously, Luffy is stronger than them. I'm just pointing out that there's no evidence that he's like a full tier above. Yeah, I'm not seeing any counter arguments other than we just don't like it. Eric saying Zoro can't do that though, it's a one-time move. One, that's never confirmed, because Zoro actually does 2 attacks with Ashura. The first attack, he is an unnamed attack, which cuts through Kaku's Rankyaku, which to date is the strongest Rankyaku out of any of the CP9, right? He cuts through Amanedachi, which means that even an unnamed slash from Ashura at that point in time was stronger than an attack that can cut the tower in half, right? So don't underestimate pre-time skip Zoro's Ashura, right? And then the second attack Zoro does is the one that cuts through Kaku. So already from its first display, it's not a one-off attack, all right? And then if you don't want to argue Zoro, okay, well then Sanji's Diablo Jambe, you know? Sanji's Diablo Jambe fucks up Jabura, 2 hits, you know? And that's clearly something that Sanji can use repeatedly. Zoro uses Ashura literally like the next in the Pacifista fight. So what's the issue here? Eric says, bro, he can use it for 3 seconds. Yeah, but in those 3 seconds, his attacks are fucking broken as fuck. Like, Eric, you're not gonna be able to argue that Zoro and Sanji are not in Luffy's tier, right? Because they ultimately destroy Kaku and Jabura low diff when they use their power-ups, right? Which means that they're at least another tier above Kaku and Jabura. And you can compare to Luffy's showings against Blueno to suggest that, yeah, they're all probably the same tier. And Oda reinforces that. Like, you're so big on, like, author's intent and portrayal and stuff. The Pacifista fight, dude. Do you think in the Pacifista fight, Oda's establishing these characters are actually all in different tiers, even though I'm portraying them all essentially doing the same thing? Come on now, man. You don't got to be upset, Eric, because, like, it doesn't matter now, because at this point, Luffy's much stronger than Zoro and Sanji, right? So why go back and try and relitigate that point, you know, when it's kind of clear-cut that, yeah, Luffy did this against Blueno, Zoro and Sanji did this against Kaku and Jabura, and then Luffy did this against Lucci. You combine all the showings, any objective breakdown basically puts them all roughly the same tier. Eric says, the issue is the details play out how the fight goes with Lucci, they would not do well. I don't think that they would beat Lucci necessarily, but to say that they're in a different tier is ridiculous, because then that would mean that you think that there's, like, several tiers between Kaku and Jabura and Lucci, right? When Zoro and Sanji stomp them that bad, like, what else do you really need, you know? You just say things play out the fight, lol? Dude, I mean... Eric, you're so big on portrayal. Break down the Pacifista fight for me. And again, we've already seen Luffy versus Blueno. I'm confused what you're not getting here, right? We've already seen fights play out. We've seen Luffy versus Blueno play out. We saw Gear 2nd versus Blueno play out. We've seen how easy Zoro and Sanji take out their opponents who are way stronger than Blueno with their power-ups, right? And then we see how much difficulty Luffy had against Lucci, even with all his power-ups, right? And then we see all 3 of them fighting on the same field against the same opponent, and it's clear Oda's portraying them as the monster trio, Gap, rest of the crew. Like, I think you got to be extremely Luffy biased or anti-Zoro and Sanji biased to argue that that's not what's being portrayed. This is the frustrating part, because people just come in with if you're just breaking it down, there's not a flaw in my reasoning here. There's no, like, people aren't this is what I hate arguing against people in chat for, because, like, you need to actually argue points. You can't just say, like, the arguments are basically Mori Anime saying Zoro and Sanji together could not beat Lucci during any slobby. Give an argument, right? You need to give an argument. Abacador says team attack against Pacifista not equal same tier. It is if you take that into account with all the showings in any slobby. It's a reinforcement in terms of portrayal, right? I would agree that it's not on its own anything, right? It's not on its own proving anything other than Oda's clearly establishing this trio is in its own tier compared to the rest of the crew when it comes to fighting the Pacifista, right? I would agree that it's not inherently on its own absolute proof, although they do all have similar showings against the Pacifista, right? And then you take into account what happened in Enies Lobby, and it's like, yeah, all those things together point to them all being in the same tier when they're using power-ups, right? You need to put forward counter arguments. You can't just be like, well, I think Zoro and Sanji couldn't beat Lucci even together. It's like, cool. Prove that based on what we saw, right? I don't know. Eric says, do you know how big X2 is? Sure, let's calculate it for Bluna then, by that logic. Yeah? What was Bluna's Daruki? You need to give a counter argument, dude. You can't just be like... You need to give a counter argument, right? Bluna's Daruki, 820, right? So, Kaku and Jarabura are almost 3x Bluno. And they have Zoans. The gap between them is way bigger than the gap between them and Lucci. Provide a counter argument, dude. All right, continuing on. I'm no longer going to respond to the pre-time skip arguments unless there's an actual counter argument to any of the points that I've made. Because otherwise it's just people wanting Luffy to be ahead and not actually looking at what Oda's put on the page. All right, continuing on. Zakororo, thanks for the 5. Imu turns to Shuri and Brook. Brook's fruit maybe awakens, might influence Imu's omen spirits like he did with Big Mom's chess pieces. Oh, that would be cool. Oh, let's get Streamlabs up to 100 real quick. Name... Izas, who says name is just pronounced Izas. All right. Izas, thanks a lot. YouTube added the extra mess. Oh, okay. We'll stick to that. Hot take. Mihawk, Shanks, Dragon, and likely Akainu will all be stronger than Kaido. I think Akainu is the one big question mark for that group to me, because he needs a boost. Because pre-time skip Akainu is not stronger than Kaido. I mean, if you think that, then you also have to think that Aokiji is stronger than Kaido. I don't know if that many people think that Aokiji is stronger. Like, pre-time skip Akainu, his strength is basically capped at, like, whatever Aokiji is. I think he needs Conqueror's Haki. I don't think you're beating Kaido without advanced Conqueror's Haki, personally. Grizzly Adams 8277, thanks for the 5. It's not just about requisite strength for Sanji's opponent. They should also have a duo dynamic with Zoro's opponent, as tends to be the case. That's a good point, I think. Let's think. Mr. 1 and Mr. 2, they didn't really have a duo dynamic. They did have a bit of a rivalry against one another. Rivalry is not the only thing that matters, because Jabura and Lucci had a rivalry. But Kaku and Jabura obviously portrayed as a duo. King and Queen obviously portrayed as a duo. Somers and Killingham portrayed as a duo. So that is a really good point. So then I just don't... You know what? Then that leads me to lead into the S-Croc idea. What Oda could do is reveal that Crocodile has always had Conqueror's Haki. He was broken in the New World, therefore the version of him that we see pre-time skip does not have Conqueror's Haki, right? So that's a route that Oda could go. Because if he goes that route, then he can make Crocodile as strong as he wants to, right? Because once you have Conqueror's Haki, it's basically like a free pass for Oda to write you however strong he wants, right? So I think that would be the route, because Mihawk and Crocodile, that's kind of become a fucking duo, you know? That's become a duo in the story, right? So he could write the S-Hawk, S-Croc dynamic like that. Even leans a little bit into the whole Sanji Crocodile, Mr. Prince antagonism way back. So it's hard to say, you know? That's the only angle I can think of among the Seraphim. That's the only otherwise that, or Oda needs to introduce a new Seraphim that is not one of the established Shichibukai. Charitar, thanks for the 10. I think Luffy is being set up to wrestle with his Joy Boy identity the same way Sanji is. It's been a through line that characters rejected or discovered their identity this arc, like Loki and Brook. That's a good point. I can see that. That's a really interesting point. Pocket Monster 6437 sent let him cook for 750 jewels. Thank you. Henchme 987 thanks for the 2. Zoro has shitty observation. Shiryu counter diffs. I don't think Zoro's ever been established to have shitty observation. Just I don't think he's ever been established to have like top tier observation. Where does Zoro have shitty observation? I mean, honestly, I don't think that Shiryu could do an... Like, let's put it this way. Even if Zoro has such shitty observation that Shiryu just stabs Zoro straight through like Garp, I don't think that's enough damage to put Zoro down. In which case, Zoro just does exactly what Garp did, which is take the hit and then fuck up Shiryu, right? What would stop Zoro from doing that? Hydrogen sent star for 2 jewels. Thank you. Tio Treviso, thanks for 2. One Piece is only manga with old head NBA scaling convos. I mean, that's because the old heads were established for so long. It's fair. Alejandro Ramirez, thanks a lot. Loki sees Luffy's about to be finished and calls his friend Shaggy to say goodbyes if something happens to him, then goes against Emu in hybrid form. That's a very specific prediction. I'm going to split this into... I'll give it to you if you're right on either of these things. Loki calls Shaggy to say goodbye. Loki goes hybrid form. That'd be wild. Alejandro Ramirez. Tio, thanks for the 2. One Piece version of 90s old heads say LeBron isn't top 5. Ishan Knazra, thanks for the 2. Kid saves Luffy with the Conqueror's Haki Dam departure. So this is what I talked about in this last podcast, Morgecast, not the Pirate King podcast, Morgecast, but Kid is the one missing piece I haven't mentioned so far as potentially coming through to help out in the Elbaf fight. But if there was ever a time, now would be the time, you know? Kid saves Luffy with a Conqueror's Haki damned departure. I'll give it to you even if the name isn't right. Even Kid just showing up at all, I'll give it to you. Alex DeHore, 1190, thanks a lot. Nami and Zoro's dynamic is the most essential to start Luffy's journey. Is starting to get a ton of hate on Twitter from Sanji fans because it takes away credit? Where? I mean, it's... What? Who's saying that? I think that's just arguing with the author, you know? Because the Oda's outright said it in a quote. And he's outright launched the story with the Luffy Zoro Nami dynamic. I think that's just... It's just arguing with the author, you know? And takes away credit is just hard. Like, Usopp is more essential to Luffy's... Sanji's more essential in terms of, like, practical stuff. Like, they get further without Usopp than they do without Sanji, right? But in terms of completing the core cast, there's a reason that Oda went order of Luffy, then Zoro, then Nami, then Usopp, then Sanji, right? In terms of completing the dynamic of what the core cast needs to be, Usopp is more essential, and like writing wise. Momans, thanks for the 5. I think next is Mini Arc, a prologue / prelude to Final War. A few nuanced chess pieces need to be set just before the war starts. I disagree it started. I could see a mini arc taking place. I could see a mini arc. I feel like it's a natural transition to step out of Elbaf into the world at war. It's similar to what we got in Wano, but I could see there being a mini arc. The chess pieces needing to be set up. The thing is that I think that sometimes, like, for the sake of the story, Oda just has those happen in the background, you know? Kind of like, remember when the Reverie began and everyone was like, oh my god, we're getting the full Reverie arc, how's everything going to play out? Oda just cut away, had Wano play out, and then he cut back to basically reveal he gave us the very tail end of the Reverie, but most of the big events, it was to see the fallout of it, right? Like, oh my god, the Shichibukai were abolished, and now a new Yonko crew formed, like Crossskill. Like, it's just catching us up on the things that have happened afterwards. You know? Because it is a lot, it can take a lot of story space to show us all of those things playing out, you know? So it's easier to kind of just like give us the recap version. Joseph eBay, thanks for being a Pirate King tier member for 21 months, man. I hope you enjoyed the last Pirate King podcast. Morge, my guy, hope you've been well. I predict red-haired pirates come to intervene with Yasop shouting Emu to lead the charge. With Yasop shooting Emu to lead the charge. Red-haired pirates showing up would be crazy. I mean, I do feel like they'll still show up in some way this arc, but I just don't know what like, I feel like Shanks coming to save Luffy right now just goes against what their promise was, and it even goes against, like, Shanks straight up said he didn't want to meet Luffy after Marineford because he doesn't want to meet Luffy in the context of Luffy kind of being defeated and having to be saved and stuff. Like, I don't know. I would love to see the red-haired pirates come in to help, but not to save Luffy. Like, there's a difference between coming in to help versus coming in to save Luffy's ass. I would hope we're done with Shanks having to save Luffy's ass, because that dude has done that over and over and over. He even did it at Wano. Like, I'm not saying Green Bull would have been that much of a problem, but, you know, who wants to fight a fucking admiral when you're still recovering from fighting Kaido and everything like that, you know? Like, Shanks even then was doing Luffy a solid. Red-haired pirates intervene with Yasop. How do you spell Yasop? Shooting Emu. All right. Isis, thanks for the 5. You argue undebatable things because people disagree, but act like ambiguous stuff has no discussion, and you're obviously right. Pre-time skip Luffy is obviously on the same tier. But act like ambiguous stuff has no... Wait. Pre-time skip Luffy is obviously on the same tier. Wait, so we're on the same page, right? I agree that pre-time skip Luffy is on the same tier as Zoro and Sanji. I argue undebatable things because people disagree. Yeah, but act like ambiguous stuff has no discussion, and you're obviously right. I think I act that way when I don't see people putting points, right? So, like, again, if we recapped the discussion about pre-time skip Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, right? If you go through my previous streams, generally if someone brings up a point that I have not thought about or is something that directly contradicts what I'm saying, I do tend to walk it back or say something like, I acknowledge that, etc., right? But I don't just fold if I've laid out points and then people are just like, comments like, Zoro and Sanji together with Luz to Lucci. It's like, that's not an argument, that's just claiming something. Like, that's just a claim, right? So if I lay out the points, which is like, look, Luffy did this against Blueno, Zoro and Sanji did this against Kakujabura, and Luffy did this against Lucci, and these are the gaps between all the characters. Looking at that, it is very difficult to argue that Luffy is just in another tier than they are, right? It's very, very difficult to argue. This is reinforced by later on, when Oda finally shows the three of them fighting together. He portrays them as a trio, all doing similar damage to the Pacifista, right? So you add those things together, it seems like there's more evidence that Luffy, Zoro, Sanji are just in the same tier, right? Now, I'd be happy to hear otherwise if you can point me to something that goes against any of those points, right? But that's not the case. People are just like, it feels like a vibes-based thing, which is just like, no, it just feels like Luffy's way ahead of Zoro and Sanji. It's like, that's cool that it feels that way, but it doesn't seem like that's what Oda's portraying, and it goes against the logic that the story is presented, you know? That's all I'm saying. Like, I'm cool to entertain an argument or something that, like, I have, like, a point that disproves one of my points, right? Anyway, continuing on. Julian Reed, thanks for the 5. Your theory still hasn't sold me. Let's say Luffy's actually down here. What is stalling Emu while Zoro and Sanji's fights finish? He travels Elbaf very fast. I don't know. We have to wait and see. But I do think that it's possible that Zoro and Sanji finish their fights rather quickly. And it's important to consider that their fights have already started concurrent while I think Loki was still fighting. No, it was as the swap was happening between Luffy and Loki. Like Zoro and Sanji had already began their fights. So their fights would have to wrap up quickly, like within a couple chapters. But the way Oda plays timelines, things can be happening at the same time, you know? Now people are arguing about parallels. I don't know what to say. Parallels, I think it's clear who the monster trio parallel among the Roger Pirates crew. Ace, but come back. Thanks for 2. Thoughts on emu equals parrot theory going around? I have not heard of this theory. That's very interesting. What does that mean? Let's get the stream likes up to 100 real quick. Let's get the stream likes up to 100. Hold on. Shanks 3 scars sent a bunch of jewels. Sent Eagle, thank you. Sent Power Potion, thank you. Sent High Five, thank you. Anime Dimension sent Spain for 98 jewels, thank you. Random guy, thanks for the 2. Could Zoro get a Black Blade this arc? I've always felt like it'll be more dramatic to see Zoro get a Black Blade. Like, finish the fight. Like, dueling Mihawk, battling for the world's strongest swordsman title. Fight ends. Zoro's blades don't turn back to their normal color. They remain black. I always thought that that'd be the most dramatic way to do it. Symbolic, you know? Like he's reached the zenith of swordsmanship, whatever. But maybe this arc, who knows? Formless VN8 Yo sent Goat Trophy for 1,000 jewels. Thank you. Emerald Spy 0, thanks for the 5. I remember hearing a theory that Gear 5 is Luffy's hybrid form, and his fight with Emu could be a way for him to access the full Nika transformation. So what's interesting is there are some fruits where, like, they're... So, number 1, Emu still has not shown his full Zoan form. He's not shown his full Zoan form, because if you go look at the scene with Sabo and the Gorosei, right? If you look at the scene with the Sabo and the Gorosei, oh, people are arguing trios like that. Oh my god. You're arguing like... Hold on. But first, let me get this off. In the throne room scene, Emu transforms into what seems to be like a full Zoan transformation because it's huge, right? So it seems like there's still a form that Emu hasn't shown us. So I'm curious about that. Random says, Morge, if it's obvious who his parallels to Roger Parts are, how the hell do you have the OG trio more important than the monster trio? Because you're conflating two things. One is tied to strength, right? One is tied to strength. When we compare the monster trio parallels to the Roger Pirates, right, it's entirely about strength, like the 3 strongest fighters of Roger's crew, right? That's not the same as who's the most important characters in the story, right? Most important characters are not going to be the same as like who's the 3 strongest in both crews, right? In the story, the 3 most important characters, I don't think this is debatable. I don't think it's debatable because I think there's word of God. I think Oda's already said that it's Luffy, Zoro, Nami. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it kind of is Luffy, Zoro, Nami. Like I think Oda's straight up got quotes about that. I know he does because I've done him in videos before, so I have to actually, yeah, he said that Luffy, Zoro, and Nami are the triggers / core of One Piece. What do you want to argue here? What's the argument? Emerald Spy 0, thanks for the 5. I remember hearing a theory that Gear 5... Oh, no, we covered this. Anime Dimension, thanks for the 5. You have missed my prediction. My prediction is we will get update on Robin, Saul, and Biblo, and some lore about Biblo. I'm so sorry, Anime Dimension. I'm so sorry. Hold on. Fuck. Sorry, man. I'm sorry, man. Anime Dimension previously said my prediction. Can we get some update on Robin and Biblo? I'm sorry about that. Update on Robin, Saul, and Biblo. Let's see. Julian Reed, thanks for the 5. No way, Zoro and Sanji would need to finish both their fights in 2 chapters at most. Imu went from West Village to Loki's location in the span of a single chapter. Look, let's see. Maybe there's some other stall method that happens. We could see people have even mentioned Kid showing up. We could get de-aged Jarl. We could get maybe Imu making some big speech to the Giants about, look, your leader, blah, 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 everyone's been defeated, everyone bow down to me or whatever. There's a million ways that Oda could stall the story right now, you know? Random N1M says Nami has done nothing this series that is trigger worthy or anything. She's just another crewmate that sometimes gets paired with Luffy, just like Usopp or Chopper. I don't mean to call you out, but this is just sad. This is just sad. Nami has never done anything that makes her trigger. Okay. So, what is the storyline of East Blue? What is the story? If you need a refresher, they actually just shot a whole Netflix show about this. You know, maybe if you haven't seen the anime or read the manga in a while, what's the storyline of East Blue? The storyline that brings the whole crew together. Who is the centerpiece of that storyline? Who is literally the character that the entire Straw Hat crew essentially initially bands together around the first time? Can anyone recap to me the storyline of East Blue? Like, that is an insane statement. Insane statement. The entire first saga concludes with Nami essentially being the heart of the storyline that the Straw Hats finally all come together around, right? That's the moment that the Straw Hat Pirates really form. That's the moment that they really form, right? Before that, they're just a ragtag group that's trying to be pirates, you know? Like, it's actually insane. To say that Luffy, Zoro, and Nami are not the core of the crew, or the triggers of the crew, or the center of the crew, basically means that you need to literally reread East Blue. And then come back. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Teptiu says, is East Blue Nami less important than Whole Cake Island Sanji? Let me put it this way. They didn't even send the full crew to Whole Cake Island for Sanji. They treated that like a side quest. It is not the same thing. I love the writing for Whole Cake Island Sanji, but to pretend that it's even remotely the same as the storyline of East Blue that actually formed the Straw Hat Pirates, or the storyline of Enies Lobby that actually took them to the next stage of being pirates, right? I think it's very telling that Whole Cake Island wasn't even the conclusion to a saga. It was a detour in the broader versus for Yonko storyline where they didn't even send the whole crew. They only a small squad went while the rest went to the bigger fish to fry. This is a losing battle if you want to keep pushing in this, because it just makes Sanji look worse in terms of narrative significance to now. It's silly because it's just Oda said it already. You're arguing with statements from the author, right? If you want to disprove that Oda said it, maybe it's a false quote, but I've in past videos looked and checked. It does seem to be a real quote. Maybe I was misinformed, but as long as Oda said it, that's the case. What's the argument here? Mindless Use says fans like Lorge only want hype and power scaling and feats. But I'm arguing that, is that what you think Nami is? You think Nami's a character who's hype and power scaling and feats? I don't get it. If that was the case, wouldn't I just say that the crew hierarchy is, in terms of importance or central to the narrative, is Luffy, then Zoro, then Sanji, then like Jinbei, Frankie, Robin? Wouldn't Nami and Usopp be at the bottom? I don't get it. I think if you really want to argue a character, the three most central characters to the Straw Hats are... Oda says it's Luffy, Zoro, Nami. I think you could argue Usopp. I think you have an outside argument for Sanji. That's my take. Mindless Use, I don't think you're giving Sanji fans a good name, because he says, you're hating on Sanji, so you're automatically a Loro fan. I think that you're not giving Sanji fans a good name with that level of debate. I don't know. I think at this point you're arguing with the author, right? If you want to take it up with Oda. Take it up with Oda. That's all I gotta say. Like, if Oda says that they are the core and trigger of One Piece, what more do you want? What more do you want? I don't know the argument. I don't know what more people want. It's also objectively true. East Blue, ultimately a Nami storyline, right? That's what East Blue is. If you want to compare Whole Cake Island, it is nowhere near as significant of a storyline as East Blue. It's also not a storyline that is about the whole crew. It's got half a crew. It's not a storyline that's rallying the crew. There's not really comparative arguments here, right? What's the parrot theory? Emu is actually Joy Boy's parrot? I don't know about that. Tornado says Morge teach them about the hat scene for Nami. I don't think I should have to. I think the hat scene for Nami speaks for itself, right? I think until Luffy gives his hat to another Straw Hat, she's top 3. I think that's it. Royal Fun 1031 says we ain't in East Blue no more. That doesn't mean that Oda's core concept of the story has changed. We all know that Oda's planned One Piece very extensively from the beginning, right? So the core concept of the story hasn't changed. If you want to argue, like, I don't even know how you make this argument. I think if you weight very heavily Whole Cake Island, because it's a more recent arc, then you would have an argument against Nami. But if you look at the story in totality, part of it is like pre-time skip, right? So pre-time skip, there's much more focus. Pre-time skip, Sanji has the least focus character-wise out of the East Blue 5 by a large margin. The only arc that is truly significant for Sanji's character pre-time skip, for his character, right? Not just he gets moments, for his character, is objectively Baratie. Post-time skip, I feel like Oda's doing a lot of makeup with the character. So we got Whole Cake Island, which is a huge arc. And then he's gotten really good stuff in Wano and is about to get stuff in Elbaf. So I could see the argument that maybe by the end of the story, we'll have a rearranged sort of hierarchy in terms of character significance of the Straw Hats. But if you look at the totality of pre-time skip, Nami gets way more character writing than Sanji. And character focus, and she's generally treated more as the center of the crew. If you look at post-time skip storylines as well, Nami's significance has gone down, but she is huge in Whole Cake Island as well. And she's had more of a part she's been more central to the story's writing in, like Punk Hazard, I would argue. She's been weaker post-time skip. So I think post-time skip, you've got a stronger argument. I just don't think it invalidates pre-time skip, because I'm always going to view pre-time skip as the section of the story where Oda actually focused on the Straw Hats, whereas post-time skip, a lot of the focus on the Straw Hats is sporadic. So if we're really sitting back, if we go with the premise that Oda has changed his initial vision for the story, that's one argument, right? So if we ignore Oda's words and say that Oda has changed his initial premise for the story, if we entertain that, which is fine to say, and we look primarily at how things have developed in the post-time skip, then I would argue Sanji is the most focused on Straw Hat post-time skip, right? So you could say that the hierarchy of things have rearranged. I think if we give it to the end of the story, then we get a better vision of how Oda feels overall about the Straw Hats, because, you know, getting to Laughdale is likely going to be a very Nami-centric arc, right? Navigation-focused. On top of that, it's just like, Oda's still kind of doing that trend where, you know what? Let's just give it time. Let's just give it time. Maybe we can revisit this towards the end of the story. At the moment, I think it's still a stretch to argue that Sanji has surpassed Nami in importance, but if you want to say recency, I would say character focus, Sanji is definitely, in recent times, the most focused on Straw Hat. Does that make everyone happy? Does that make everyone happy? Bruno says huge is maybe a stretch for Nami and Whole Cake Island, even if she's focused more. I mean, I view Whole Cake Island as largely a, like, in terms of the Straw dynamic that's most prominent, it's Luffy Nami. You know, it's kind of a tag team storyline for them. The central scene and conflict is Luffy and Sanji, right? But in terms of like who's actually lockstep with Luffy throughout the arc, it's a Luffy Nami buddy cop storyline, you know? Suhas sent Argentina for 98 jewels. Did we already cover this? Rei Uchiha, thanks for being a Yonko team member for 45 months. I predict Black Zetsu is going to show up and backstab Imu. The Kaguya will get resurrected and pull the Straw Hats into the in the Ani dimension. I don't know. Mindless Youth says, no, he was deep from the start. All the Straw Hats are deep from the start. That's not unique to Sanji. All the Straw Hats were unique from the start, or deep from the start. In terms of actual character focus, deep character focus, Sanji objectively gets by far the least of any of the East Blue Straw Hats pre-time skip. He also gets objectively by far the most, yes, by far the most post-time skip, right? So I think Oda's balanced it out with Sanji pretty well. Andrew says, I wish Nami got the writing she did in Whole Cake Island throughout the post-time skip. Yeah, I think the trickiest thing is that Nami is the Straw Hat who is best suited to be a foil for Luffy for the longest period. Like, she works best when she's able to just be with Luffy for a long period of time. She is the Straw Hat that plays off of Luffy the best for extended sequences, by far. Even Usopp is good, but it's more so comedy and light. Luffy and Zoro can be cool in moments and scenes where they need to be badass, etc. But there's not as much to work with the two of them for an extended period of time. In terms of just natural dynamic, where you have character A who bounces off character B and their traits work for natural dialogue over an extended period of time, play off each other well, foils, etc. It's Luffy Nami easily, and you can see that over the course of many storylines. That's why Luffy and Nami work so well in most of Whole Cake, because Nami is basically the reverse of Luffy in almost every capacity. Everything Luffy is plays off best with Nami, and that's why she's his navigator. You know, that's literally what she's symbolically supposed to represent. All of his worst tendencies and like direct, like impulsiveness, chaos, right? To give it direction and ground it, you need Nami, right? There's reasons behind why Oda's written all of these characters the way that he has. And Nami was generally intended to be Luffy's first crewmate even before Zoro. I think people are really losing the plot when they're trying to underplay Nami's significance in the story. Every version of One Piece, Romance Dawn, etc., it's Luffy Nami, because that's just the natural character dynamic that works best for a character like Luffy. There's no other Straw Hat that you can just put in a duo adventure for an extended period of time and have it play out as naturally as it does with Luffy and Nami, you know? Anyway, continuing on. Isis, thanks for the 5. Morge, look at the Reddit theory by RKSEU right now. Emu might actually be Joy Boy's parrot. Lol. I'm not looking at a Reddit theory right now. I'm ready to wrap up stream. Deptia, thanks for the 2. People remember Nami's fan service more than the plot. I could see that, like, I think post-time skip, if we really take into account again, I view most of the Straw Hat's dynamics and writing through the pre-time skip lens, because to me, that's when the story really was about the Straw Hat Pirates, right? So I weight that more heavily. But post-time skip, I view a lot of them as shells of their former selves. Nami has leaned more into fan service in recent times. Anyway. Alex DeHorse says, people attribute every argument in the crew in Water 7 to Sanji being the counterpart to Zoro and not Nami. They say he was the one who was also just did the most pragmatism usually attributed to Nami. What? That's like directly false. Sanji's in fact not even involved in most of the crew's decision-making in Water... Like, the Water 7 storyline ultimately comes down to the core of the crew, which is Luffy, Zoro, and Nami debating what needs to be done with Robin. The rest of the crew sort of falls apart as it goes, and eventually it's just down to that core trio dynamic. And they're the ones that basically decide what needs to be done with Robin. They're the ones that rally together. They're the ones that are basically like, we're going to Henny's lobby. They're the ones that spearhead the whole Sea Train mission. Sanji is off on his own adventure, right? And that's where he works really well. But the core of the crew is clearer than ever in the Water 7 Enies Lobby storyline. And it comes full circle with the debate about Usopp. That's a debate between Zoro and Nami representing two different sides of the equation, with Luffy at the center, right? This even is reflected in the Zou debate, where, again, it's like they're trying to figure out what to do with Sanji this time, and now it's Nami and Zoro at odds again, with Luffy in the center. That's very black and white. There's not really any argument for Sanji in that discussion. Mindless Use, I think you're mistaking me arguing that Luffy, Zoro, and Nami are the core of the crew and ultimately the center, right? For me saying that Sanji did nothing in that arc. He did a ton that arc. Those are not mutually exclusive. Yeah, no, of course Sanji had his own mission. He took action, etc. What am I saying here that people are missing? Who is the center of the crew? Every Straw Hat contributed, right? Every Straw Hat contributed. If we want to really debate who had the most focus in Water 7 Enies Lobby, it's fucking Usopp. It's not any of these bozos, okay? So fuck Zoro, Nami, and Sanji in that case, right? What we're talking about, who is the core of the crew, your arguments that, well, Sanji was off doing his own thing, contradict that argument. So you're going against the argument you're trying to make. This is this is so frustrating because it's like it's not enough for Sanji to be acknowledged as like, yeah, he's like Monster Trio member like Luffy and Zoro. He's part of the main trio in terms of fighters. Now it's like, but also, everything that Nami represents in the crew, fuck her, fuck Nami. That's actually Sanji's role. It's like, the fuck? What, like, that's what I'm fucking confused about, which is like, why not have everybody have their own sort of role, right? Like, this would be kind of the equivalent of like you don't see Zoro fans coming and being like, you know what? Zoro is the heart of the crew. No Zoro fan fucking says that, because they know it's not his role. You don't see Zoro fans coming through and being like, you know what? Zoro's like the brains of the crew, because that's not his fucking role. Zoro fans don't come through and they're like, you know what? Zoro is the best at like solo missions and being like this stealth guy. That's not his fucking role. I feel like it's with Sanji fans where it's like, Oda said that Luffy, Zoro, and Nami are the core trio of One Piece. Fuck the author. That shit's changed. Have you read Whole Cake Island? Am I right? Negates all of pre-time skip, am I right? Like, where does it... I just don't get it. It's like, well, Luffy, Zoro, and Nami, clearly the centerpieces of intra-crew debates and discussions as we see in Water 7, Enies Lobby, post Enies Lobby, Zoe. But Sanji's off doing his own thing, which means he's still the center of the crew, right? It's like the most backwards logic in the world. Why not just be happy with Sanji having the roles and place in the story that he does? What's the need to be like, fuck that character, that's actually Sanji's role. Fuck this character, Sanji's actually that. Like, what the fuck? I've even seen people be like, Zoro's not the vice captain, Sanji's the vice captain. In what world like... I think the Zoro fandom is the worst fandom in One Piece by a good margin. But at the same time, I feel like Sanji fans have this sort of like, it's the reverse, where there's a sort of insecurity where Sanji needs to be put into lots of conversations that just don't make sense for him. Does that make sense? Like, Zoro fans are like delusional to a point where they're like, I think Zoro... Ryuma, Joy Boy, and Imu, top 3 strongest characters in the story. Like, they'll say shit like that, right? They'll put Zoro to but like, it's just so blatantly delusional, right? Black blades mean everything, yada, 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 right? But Sanji fans, it's like, they're insecure about each part of him as a character. They're like, well, he needs to be the strongest, right? But status-wise, he's like the vice captain, or there is no vice captain. They'll argue there is no vice captain, right? Or like, character-wise, he's like the Nami of the crew. What does Nami do then? Fuck her. She just doesn't matter, right? Fuck Oda too, for whatever he said in the past, right? It's just weird. It's like, he doesn't need to be... what you're describing is like the perfect, most important character in One Piece, which is not what he is, you know? I don't know. Best chef, Zoro's a bum. That's the funniest thing, which is like, they don't even bring up the chef part, which is like the part which is like unequivocally established, which is like, he's the cook of the crew, he's the chef, Luffy loves food, that's really important, right? They're like, nah, fuck that, we don't even mention that. We don't mention that. Enies Lobby, Sanji was the star. Water 7, Sanji was the star. What the fuck? What the fuck is this? I don't know. Yeah, that's the frustrating thing. Sanji fans at the same time like to act as victims and the best at the same time. That's the thing. It's just like, Sanji fans come in with a victim complex as though like everybody misunderstands or underrates the character or something like that. Zoro fans come in with a like an overconfidence, like superiority complex to some degree, where it's just like, he's the best. He fucks up everybody, etc. It's two frustrating fan bases for different reasons. That's all I can say. Anyway. That's the other thing, JR. Sanji fans in their defense have had a rough go at it, they feel like. That's the thing, which is like, I have more sympathy for the Sanji fan base because like they had to suffer through like the Fishman Island days with the nosebleeds and stuff. They had to suffer through like Dressrosa where he's getting shipped off and stuff like that. Whole Cake, great for writing, but also didn't really catch him up in feats and stuff. Like, there was a long period where Sanji fans weren't really getting what they wanted. But then it's like, I always say this, it's like, if you give a mouse a cookie, you know? If you give a mouse a cookie, he's gonna want some milk. If you give him some milk, he's gonna want some Ovaltine, right? So like, as soon as Sanji fans started getting some stuff, you know, great writing in Whole Cake, continues in Wano and Elbaf, he's getting his power-ups, that'll put him right there with Zoro and everything like that. That's great. But now it's just like, the tables have turned. And now, fuck the OG trio. The OG trio is always Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji. Nami triggered the story? No, East Blue. Fuck that shit. We're gonna white that out, right? The story began with Baratier and then skipped to Whole Cake Island. Except for Water 7 Enies Lobby, where Sanji was also the core center of the crew. We just... what the fuck? I don't know. Anyway. Alright, everybody. Stream has gone on long enough. We are going to call it there. We got some good predictions in. And yeah, I'm excited to see where things go. Next Monday's stream is going to be a Hunter x Hunter stream. So watch out for that. Next Monday's stream is going to be a Hunter x Hunter stream. Probably a discussion of the recent Hunter x Hunter chapters. Maybe a reaction to the newest chapter that comes out Sunday. So we'll see. But yeah. All right, everybody. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. And with that, I will talk to you all later.